Hello everyone and welcome back to Rich History. Today, as you can see, we're doing something a little bit different. Today I'm going to be taking you guys on a historic tour of Fort Hunt Park with an emphasis on the special operations that were conducted here during World War II. If you live in the Alexandria or DC area, you're probably familiar with Fort Hunt Park. If you've ever played Little League Soccer or done a scout camp, you've probably done it here. Little do most people know that this is actually a fascinating military history site. But why would the US government demolish almost all of their own installation and convert it into a park right after the war ended? Why was this installation so secret that during its service it was only referred to as an address, P.O. Box 1142? We'll get to these questions, but first, here's some background. So in the late 1890s, with the Spanish-American War raging on, the U.S. Army bought this land from local farmers so that they can install fortifications to defend Washington, D.C., which is right down the river, against a potential Spanish fleet. After the war ended, the base was garrisoned until the 1920s when it was sold to the Department of Public Parks. When the Great Depression hit, former service members were hit hard and the installation was used to house veterans' rights protesters, which eventually led to the installation being used as a camp for the Civilian Conservation Corps. CACC was a program started by President Franklin Roosevelt to create jobs for young American men who were unemployed. During the late 30s and early 40s, the CCC camp started to wind down its efforts, and a signal corps moved in to monitor international transmissions looking for signs of war. When war did break out, things got a lot more interesting. So Pearl Harbor happens, and it's 1941. The U.S. War Department decided to take the Fort Hunt property over and use it as a prisoner of war camp. But unlike other POW camps, Fort Hunt was very special. The camp was reserved specifically for those deemed to have high-value information, including rocket scientists, nuclear engineers, and U-boat captains. When an enemy soldier or sailor was taken prisoner, they would be evaluated for potential value. If they were deemed important enough, they would be sent back to the States, and the first place they would go is Fort Hunt. The secrecy surrounding the camp was extreme, since prisoners would not be registered with the Red Cross until they left the facility, so it was against the Geneva Convention. There was also another program which focused on aiding Allied POWs in Germany to escape and bring back valuable information. Now that you have a quick overview, I'm going to take you on a tour of the site, starting with some of the earlier buildings and working our way into World War II buildings. We're going to start our journey here today where many started their journey at the Fort Hunt facility, with the wharf and wharf house here on the Potomac River. All that's left here today is the pylons, as you can see. That's because after the parkway was constructed in the 1930s, there was no need for shipborne supplies. Behind me you can see the non-commissioned officers' dwelling, which is the last remaining wooden building on the post. This particular building dates from around the turn of the century and is built in the style that many of the pre-World War II buildings were built in. Also near the NCO quarters, at the entrance of Fort Hunt Park, was where many of the utilities necessary to keep the facility operational were located, such as the supply room, the coal shed, and the underground water reservoir. Behind me is where the officers' quarters and many of the administration offices were located on the post. Included in this area of buildings was a pool that could be used by troops that were stationed here, as well as the prisoners on special occasions. Here below parking area B was where most of the troops stationed on the fort were located. To my left and right were very long buildings that were used to house the enlisted personnel on the fort. Also located on this area were latrines and supply rooms. Another important part of maintaining the soldiers was where they ate, which is located right across the walkway here. Based on the locations of existing trees, and also based on this divot here, we can assume that this is where the mess hall was located for personnel that were stationed here at Fort Hunt. Here between the Battery Commander Station and Battery Mount Vernon was the NCO Club, where non-commissioned officers could come and have a cold one while having a game of horseshoes, as you can see behind me. Around where I'm standing is where the firehouse, the infirmary, and the post exchange, which is where soldiers were able to buy items, was located. These commodities helped the post function like a city, which was important since during the war years, troops weren't often allowed to leave the post due to secrecy reasons. As you can see behind me, this is the Battery Commander Station. When the batteries were serviced during the Spanish-American War, the battery commander would sit up there and he'd direct fire from all the cannons on the river, which is down kind of in front of me. Speaking of batteries, we're standing here on Battery Mount Vernon, which is the largest battery on the property. This battery was built here during the Spanish-American War and housed 3 8-inch rifled guns, which would stand here on these gun emplacements. I'm standing here on the side of one of the many gun emplacements that were located here on the Fort Hunt facility. The river is behind me, and the gun would be facing that direction, being maneuvered by wheels that ran along these tracks right here on the side of the emplacement. Ammunition would also be brought up through these 2 doors. Keep in mind that during the Spanish-American War and during World War II, there was no trees or foliage here, so there was a clear view line to the river. During World War II, the walls inside the battery were asbestos lined and microfilm was stored there by the National Archives, which is why it is all welded off and you can't go down there anymore today. Battery Porter, which is right behind me, and Battery Robinson were both armed with 5-inch rapid-firing cannons. Batteries were both made out of concrete, which at the time was very state-of-the-art and very expensive for the military to make. As I mentioned previously, Fort Hunt was home to some extremely top-secret programs. Right now I'm standing in POW Enclosure A. The interrogators who interrogated the Germans would use cigarettes and alcohol to help get information out. They would seemingly ask personal questions, but then they would use that to get information on bombing campaigns and the state of the German military at the time. A lot of the time the interrogators were actually German-born Jews who could actually speak the language. Inside the wire was a school, which was a very long building that went down to that tree down there. And then behind me, over to the left, was an intelligence operations center, complete with intelligence evaluation, which is basically where the interrogators would interrogate the prisoners that they had. Over by the trash cans over there was a barracks building for the prisoners as well. Where the grass is greener, you can see divots where we believe that the barbed wire fence used to be. In 1944, a prisoner named Werner was actually gunned down while trying to escape. The story goes, Werner was a U-boat commander during World War II, and he was notorious for machine gunning the crew of an unarmed British transport ship. Now, when the interrogators were interrogating him, right over there actually at the evaluation place, they threatened that they were going to turn him over to the British by having an American interrogator dress up as a British officer and come in and demand that he be turned over to them. Hanke knew that being turned over to the British was an automatic death sentence, so he decided to make a suicidal escape attempt. While doing his routine exercise one day, he made a break for the fence. He got over the first fence, which we believe is here, and then he went over here to the second fence, but halfway up he was hit by machine gun fire from one of the guard towers. Werner was the only casualty during Fort Hunt Park during World War II. We are now standing in POW Enclosure B. The enclosure is shaped as a plus sign with a central watchtower in the middle, with 4 smaller watchtowers along the outside of the perimeter of the fence. As you can see to my left, the remains of one of the smaller watchtowers still remains. Between the perimeter of the outside fence over there and Battery Mount Vernon, there was a information extraction center that was used to monitor microphones that were placed among the POWs. Though they weren't very effective because the POWs would eventually find these microphones and they would feed false information to them to throw the interrogators off. This bit of concrete is all that remains of the most secret part of the Fort Hunt military installation. In 1942, the War Department decided that Fort Hunt would be home to the MISX program, which was essentially us gathering information from servicemen who had been taken prisoner by the Germans. To do this, the old post hospital, which is now where the pavilion stands, was converted into a cryptographic center that would pick up radio signals sent in code from our POWs overseas. Across the road from the pavilion, which is where we are, a new building was constructed called the warehouse, where experts would come in and build special devices that would be sent overseas to the prisoners. Some of these items included razor blades that when put on a pencil, the G in Gillette would point north. Other items included radio transmitters hidden inside baseballs and secret documents and maps that were hidden inside playing cards and underneath the layers of chessboards. As the war started coming to a close, operations here at Fort Hunt started to wind down. Only 6 days after the surrender of Japan, a 36-straight-hour bonfire was held where all papers and intelligence related to the programs here at Fort Hunt were completely destroyed. After the war ended, all the buildings on the site were also destroyed, and now it basically is just a field. Little do most people know that they're throwing around the football on one of the most secretive military sites of World War II. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you want to see some more military-related content, check out my other videos. If you want to see something in particular reviewed in a video, leave a like and a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.